So the first time I saw this space was when I went to go meet with them with my design presentation. And I had all my fabric samples. I had my printed presentation. We're all in this room 6 feet apart, sitting on the floor on the rug with masks. I've got my budget. So we walk through the presentation. I get to the end and I look at the husband and I'm just thinking, oh my God, he hates it. He goes, there's only one thing I don't like. I was like, okay, what is it? He goes, I don't like that oil candle that you put on one of the tables. Can we change that? I was like, sure. He's like, great. Everything else I love.
Bootstrapped Unicorns, welcome back to another episode. I am so honored to be spending time with Jeanne Collins today. She is an author. She is a former very high-level executive who decided that life is going to look different in 2020, kind of decided, you'll hear, and has championed an entirely different career and become an entrepreneur for the first time at, let's say, over 30. And that's right? Yeah?
Yeah, that's one way to put it. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah.
Sure.
I too am over 30. And it's just going to be a great conversation. I'm excited. And when you're done with this, I want to encourage you, you listen, she's going to share about her book. And when people need inspiration, we entrepreneurs need that inspiration often. And we need to get our emotions in line with the hurdles that are about to be jumped. And I think you're going to get that from Jeanne's work. So, pay a lot of attention. And then I would be remiss if I didn't remind you that we are sponsored by HireVP. If you go to HireVP/unicorns, that is the landing page where you can learn about how you can also have a virtual professional, not virtual assistant. These people are college educated, high powered professionals that can work in your business. Everything from being an architect and a draftsperson to an executive assistant like we have in our business, and also editors that we have working in our business as virtual professionals. And they're staffed by HireVP. It's an outstanding organization. We believe in them, and we believe in them enough to partner with them so that you can also employ people and do it probably sooner than you feel like you were ready. And I think that's the secret sauce. It's hard to make your first hire. It's hard to make your 10th hire. And they make it really easy. So hirevp.us/unicorns. Without further ado, I want to start hanging out with Jeanne. Welcome to Bootstrapped Unicorns. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Josh, for having me. I appreciate it. And I actually just wrote down that URL that you just said about hirevp.us.
Yeah, and off camera, we can spend time on that.
That's always something really good to know. So if I looked like I was looking down writing, I actually was.
Good, I'm glad. And so we've had a great experience with them. And so your business as it stands today doesn't look anything like, let's say, even 5 years ago in your life. But today you are known as a pretty high-end interior designer. Is that accurate?
That is accurate.
All right. So I'm just going to, let's spend 2 minutes on your interior design philosophy, because we're going to deviate so fast into other things that we're going to skip that if we don't just talk about it right now. When somebody knows your work, how do they know your work? What do you believe in when it comes to interior design?
So interior design is absolutely my passion. It was my hobby. It is now my career. And I am fortunate to live in a very beautiful part of the country. I live in Connecticut, and the architecture here is so vast and varied and so interesting, and the landscape is so pretty, and I get so inspired by the variety that we have here. So people can recognize my work in the sense that it's always upscale, it's always luxury, there's always artwork. No two projects look the same. I never make the same piece of furniture. I never buy the same piece of furniture. I never repeat something that I've done in the past. So my projects are really unique to my clients. And the one thing that really makes me stand out as an interior designer, because I live in a town that has about 30 of them, and I live in a small town, is I have a very wellness-led approach to interior design. So I focus a lot on the energy of your home. How do you feel in your home? How do you function in your home? How do we create wellness spaces within your home for you so you can breathe and pause and meditate? And so my approach is a little bit different in that sense. And I also am different because I have a corporate America business background. And a lot of interior designers make things pretty, but they are not good at running a business. And in order to be truly, really successful, you have to either be good at both or hire someone who is strong at your weakness. And I happen to be good at both.
Oh, well, that's a blessing. So I got to ask you, we're in the same age bracket. Did you grow up watching This Old House? Because you said Connecticut, and I think New England architecture, Norm Abrams,
Totally.
Yeah, I actually discovered there's a channel that only airs episodes of This Old House. 24 hours a day.
Funny.
It's the This Old House channel. And so I'll turn that on for the dog when I leave, because when I come back in, one, I don't want to find some weird horror movie on for the kids if I've got the wrong channel. But when I walk in, it's just like, oh, I can sit down with my dog and watch This Old House.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome.
You must have like certain contractors that you're pairing with in your business. Have you found your Norm Abrams?
Yes and no. It depends on the client and it depends on the size of the project. So different contractors are good for different things. But I do have a set group of people that I do work with on a regular basis because that makes it a lot easier.
That makes sense. Yeah, the contracting world, we've had a lot of contractors on, and they all they do have their kind of certain vibe, and not the way they exist is like, I don't find two contractors are like the cliche. There's always there's a couple of cliches out there, I suppose, and maybe it's a lot of the low end contractors. But once you get into the high end contractors, there's a real personality thing that happens, and that rings very true. Were you dabbling in this in your previous life? I want to tease this previous life that you used to have because it's so different than what you're doing now. But were you spending time dabbling in interior design way back when?
Way back when? I did. So about 8 years ago, I bought a house by myself and started doing construction projects on it, renovation, interior design on it. So I started on my own house and really fell in love with architecture and construction and having a vision for, you take this wall down, you move this is what's going to happen. And how do you make rooms flow, but yet have each room look really unique and have a personality of its own, and doing that through wallpaper and rugs and art and furniture. And so I used my own house, and then I did design work for some friends. And so it was sort of my hobby and my passion. And it was, oh, wow, if I could do this every day, wouldn't that really be fun? And that's all it was.
I wonder how thematic that is, because I too moved from a completely different career into film and television through a hobby. And it was a very active hobby, but it was a hobby. And I wonder how many of we entrepreneurs find themselves so passionate about something they're not making money at that they eventually make that shift. Did you ever predict that 8 years ago, as you're remodeling your personal home and helping some friends, that this would become your main thing?
Never. Not in a million years would I have thought, ever. I would have never thought I was going to become an entrepreneur, because that was never my thing. I worked in corporate America. I worked for another company. That was my thing. I always felt like, I just don't necessarily have what it takes to run a business myself and to be my own boss. And I don't know enough. I don't have enough skills, which couldn't be farther from the truth. And I also never considered myself to be a creative person. I considered myself to be a salesperson, but never a creative, never someone, I was like, I can't draw, and I still can't draw, but I'm an incredibly creative person. So I never considered myself creative. And now I have found through this whole new path and this new life that actually is authentic me. Authentic me is creating my own businesses, is creating my own dream, is moving forward as an entrepreneur of multiple businesses, and is tapping into that creativity with a purpose. And I never had purpose before. And so it's just drastically different now than it was before.
It's interesting. I feel like creativity has been harmed in our society by getting conflated with the visual arts. When I was growing up, I was convinced actually by family members that I was so creative that I ought to become an inventor. So that was was a different type of creation, but it was innovating brand new, never seen before things, instead of finding creativity in the nuance, finding creativity in a business model or, a financial design. You can be new and creative and unlock new things and not ever pick up a paintbrush. And I wish I knew that as younger Josh. And I feel like you're probably wishing you knew that as younger Jeanne too, that there was a missed opportunity. And what a blessing that we've both found the difference. And so it's funny to me because I know you were working in an ad agency. And everybody hears ad agency and they go, creative. But you're saying, being in sales, that's a completely different thing. Can you describe what life was like, prior to this work transition?
Yeah, so I was a vice president of sales for a public company, and I worked in the promotion space. So I sold digital advertising, and originally sold print advertising in newspapers.
Wow.
And I managed a sales team, and it was a public company. I managed the largest division. So essentially, I say to people, I reported to Wall Street. And when you do that, I had a team at the end of 45 people. And when you do that, you report to Wall Street, and you truly are only as good as your last quarter. And I worked for a company that was in the tech sector. It was classified as tech, but the reality is it was an advertising company. And so growth numbers in tech and expectation of growth in tech is incredibly high versus advertising, which is different. So, the stress and wear and tear that has on one's life, you don't really realize until you take a step back and you walk away from that and then start to do something else. So I did that for 22 years. And then I actually got fired from my nice big VP job. And I got fired in January of 2020, right before the lockdown and during COVID. And I really had to figure out, I was turning 50 that year. As you said, I'm older than 30. I had to figure out who I was going to be when I grew up and what did I want my life to be like. And I didn't realize how much the stress of my old life was really killing me, because work came first for everything. And it was part of how I defined myself. If someone asked me, tell me about yourself, I would have said I'm a single mom and a vice president of sales. And I decided that I couldn't live my life. Like, I'm not putting that on my tombstone, neither of those things. So who am I? And, I really had to do a lot of work and a lot of reflection to figure out who I was, who I wanted to be. And it all started from really this belief that we talk about work-life balance. And I made a mindset shift and a commitment that it was going to become life-work balance for me. And I needed to put life first and myself first in that equation. And that's not selfish, but figure out how to make a living and develop businesses that would allow me to put life first.
That's outstanding. So let's talk about this transition a little bit, because I know a lot of our listeners will have either had a similar transition. I know I did too. So I've actually had two of them in my life, where one, I thought I was going pro in baseball and I had the scouts chasing me and I had the Division I scholarship and all this stuff, and my shoulder fell apart and no longer am I the hometown hero baseball player. So now who am I?
Right.
And then I had a manager take advantage of a previous business and destroy it. And I was the business owner, the guy who owned the thing. And so then I think this is common where there's a shakeup. And so you've gone through the shakeup in more recent years than I have, right? And what's day one look like? How do you start thinking about it? I mean, I'm sure there was a shock moment. I'm guessing most people don't see it coming. And then what's that look like? Because now you're to a point of wellness. I can see it. I can feel it. You're to a point of wellness. And I know, and we're going to get into some of the decisions you made to get to that point where you were actually starting to this is my new business. But let's just talk about the emotions for a second. What does that cycle look like? And what decisions did you make in the first couple of weeks?
Yeah. So it's interesting you mentioned emotion, because it is such a roller coaster ride. And I think so many of us have been fired. And I happily tell people I was fired, because I think the stigma around getting fired makes people feel that they're a failure. And so I very proudly say I was fired. And that was the best thing that ever happened in my life, because I was let go of a situation that wasn't good for me anymore. It wasn't serving its purpose for me. And it forced me to have to do the work to figure out who I wanted to be and what I wanted to become. But the beginning is really tough for anyone who's been fired. They understand this, right? It's these highs and these lows. And for me, there were a lot of highs in the sense that I no longer had the stress of my job. And it was the beginning of the year, and beginning of the year is game planning for the beginning of the year. I mean, it's crazy. January is rough. And I was like, wow, I don't have to do that anymore. And I don't have to go to the national sales meeting at the end of January. And I don't have to do these things anymore. And I don't have to do Thursday night reporting or Sunday afternoon reporting anymore. So part of it was very freeing, because I physically felt lighter. And people would say, you look really great. And I was like, that's because I physically feel like this huge weight, which is called stress, has been lifted from my life. And I now have different stress, like how in the world am I going to pay my mortgage?
Right.
But the stress that job was causing me, because of the responsibility and the weight of that responsibility and that lifestyle, was now gone. And so, but then there's also the emotional part of, that everyone goes through in the beginning. How dare they have done this to me? I didn't deserve this. I worked so hard. I was so devoted. And everyone who gets fired has those same emotions to it. And then there was the friendship part, which was also very interesting because I managed such a large team. And it was very interesting to see who reached out, how they reached out, and then who didn't. And that is very eye-opening because a lot of people don't know how to deal with a situation like that. And I actually give advice about that to people, especially when they manage a team, what to tell the people on the team in terms of how to treat the person who's been fired. And I lost some friends that I had for 12 years.
Wow.
In that process. And, I had people on my team that had worked for me for 11 years. And, you're talking marriage, divorce, kids, death, parents dying, cancer, like everything that people go through in life over a 10-year period. And to then have them fade out of my life was very difficult. But at the same time, I very quickly decided after a couple of weeks, like, okay, I really need to dig in. I need to dig into me, and I need to dig into what else could I do? Because the thought of continuing to do what I was doing in the industry I was doing wasn't really going to work. And so I kept thinking I could still run a sales team. That's where I started, was I could still run a sales team, but maybe I need a different industry. And so I have this skill set, and maybe I transfer it to a different industry and I figure out how to do that. Mm-hmm. And that's where I started, because that is what happens for a lot of people. They've lost their passion for their industry. But your skills are still your skills. So take them somewhere else. And so that's where I started. And then through a process of a business coach and a lot of reading and a lot of journaling and a lot of meditating, I was like, I don't know that I want to work for corporate America anymore. I don't know that I want to work for anyone but myself. So maybe we're going to try something drastically different, do a full 180 and start my own business. And
best book that you read during the process of figuring all this out, what was it?
Oh, hold on. I'm going to go get it and show it to you. Hold on.
Okay. I feel like we should have music for this. Just oh, here it is.
I tell everyone they must read this book.
Comeback Careers. Huh. What'd you take from that?
This book was life-changing for me. And I remember I was reading this book. It was February. I was on vacation in Florida reading the book. And
good place to vacation.
It was. After reading that book in vacation in February, I decided no more corporate America. I can't do this anymore. And the book is really meant for people who either want to go back to work and have been out of the workforce for a while and need to figure out how do you re-enter and how do you find the value in your skills that you can contribute and how do you network and how do you get back in. Or people who are, let's call us midlife, who want to make a major career shift. And how do you do that? How do you drastically change your career that you've had for, 20 years? How do you do that? And so the book is filled with tips and tricks and resources and exercises that really makes you think about what you like, not just what you're good at. What do you like and how do you want to feel during your day? And that's what I started to focus on. And all of a sudden it was like, what I liked about running a sales team was I really liked mentoring. I really liked people feeling good. I liked seeing people grow. I liked sharing my experiences and having people benefit from my experience and then have themselves grow and then transfer that on to someone else. So out of all of that, I decided that I was going to figure out what did I like to do? And if I could work and money wasn't an issue, what would I do? And I was like, I would design kitchens and bathrooms because I love cooking and I love interior design. I would design kitchens and bathrooms. I would become a kitchen and bathroom designer. That's what I would do. If I didn't have to worry about the paycheck, that's what I would do. And so I decided, well, if that's what I love, I'm going to go do that. And the paycheck will come because if you work hard and you have a passion for something and you have a pretty good business sense, you can figure it out. And if you have a service that there's a market for your service, you can succeed.
That's outstanding. So you clearly highly recommend the book. Show it one more time.
Highly. Yes.
Yep.
Sorry, I had to walk away.
We're going to give a super plug for it. Comeback Careers. So if anybody's on that pivot, go ahead and this is a unsponsored plug. I know neither of us.
Unsponsored plug.
Yeah, but it's great. I love stuff like that. So what are you now are newly aware that you're going to make a big shift. It's the middle of the pandemic. You managed to make it to Florida, which was good. That was great. So
I did. It was right before we weren't allowed to travel anymore.
Those were weird times. I'm blessed.
It was like 3 weeks, right? 3 weeks before.
I live in Florida, so I kept traveling to just my backyard. But so many people were stuck in their homes up north, and I was like, oh, God bless them. I'm originally from Rochester, New York, so I know cold and snow.
You know the cold.
But so now you're locked in, you're newly aware, and you got to hatch a plan to make this pivot. What are the steps that you do? How do you do this? And you mentioned earlier you're a single mom, and you've got I'm doing the math. Is she like 14, 15 years old at this time?
Let's see. This was 4 years ago. She's 13.
Oh my God. So you've got a 13-year-old at home.
13-year-old daughter. Mm-hmm.
And you're locked in with a 13-year-old. You got to pivot your entire career. My mind's exploding. Like I love my children so much, but if I was locked in a solo house, even a large house with my oldest daughter, trying to replan a career and keep her sane, something's gonna give. How'd you do it, and what did you do? What are the steps? What is the process?
So the first process was making the decision that that's what I wanted to do. And so it was like, okay, now I need to figure out how to incorporate a business and what my business name is going to be and what's my website going to be, and making sure my business name is a website that's available, and some of those logistics. So I would spend time every day on what I call the logistics behind starting a business. And my business coach had said, why don't you reach out to the Small Business Association in your state, and you can get a free business coach, and you can get someone who's probably retired, but is, maybe has experience in your industry. You might get lucky.
Was this the SCORE program?
Yeah. So
perfect. Love it.
And it was free. And so I was like, okay, and it was COVID and everyone was home. And so I was like, okay, and I got assigned to a coach and had a couple meetings with him. And he was really helpful in terms of, my target audience, and here's what you need to do, and here are the steps, and here's how you should start. I was fortunate. My dad had his own business as his second career. So I was able to tap into his knowledge about starting a business, and do I want to be an LLC or an S Corp or this, or, I had to ask around to a lot of people to try to figure it out. And once I picked a business name, then I was like, okay, now you need to become incorporated. So LegalZoom, here we come. And They did that part. But then the second part was, okay, I'm moving into an industry that I don't have any credentials on. I have an executive MBA. I have 22 years of sales experience, but I don't have any credentials on being an interior designer. So who's going to hire me when I don't have a degree in this? So I started doing research on how I can get a degree in this. Without having to go back for a master's. So there are lots of certificate programs on interior design. And the one that I wanted to do was at Parsons in New York, but I had missed the deadline to start that semester. And they actually do trimesters, so I'd missed the deadline. So I started another one, New York Institute of Art and Design.
Oh,
and
cool.
It was all online. And I was like, no problem. I got this. You did it at your own pace. I was like, I'm not working. I got this. I'm going to be done with this in 3 months. It was so hard. It took me 9 months. And I wasn't working at the time. And then in the interim, I started the Parsons program. And I finished the Parsons program. Normally takes about 1.5 years, and I finished it in less than 9 months because I doubled down.
What does it say about the NIAD program? Holy cow!
I was like, I gotta get past this like school thing. You know what I mean? But I started my business before I was done with the school thing, also, which I think is important because sometimes as businesses and entrepreneurs, we feel like we have to know everything before we do anything.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot of value in not waiting until you get to that point. There's a huge value in doing and then continuing to learn as you do. Because if you're just going to wait until you perfectly have all your degrees and you perfectly have your website and, you're perfectly financed and you're set up, it might never happen.
That's right.
You might never get there.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I've got a friend who is incredibly rich, 9 figures plus, and his number one phrase is grow your wings on the way down. He has never started anything with a full plan. And look at how he's done.
Right.
So and also minimum viable product's a big deal too. Like you already knew you could design. You already knew you had the skill sets. It was a matter of refining it so you could prove it to the audience. You know what? You're in sales and you stopped yourself to get degrees. Can you unpack that a little bit? Like, you understand what it means to sell and you found that to be super valuable, but you still started the business. Like, you've got some real high level, like, important intel there. What from your sales bone of your background was telling you to put it in that order?
Yeah. So one of the most interesting things I did, so I was going to school and I was like, okay, I'm going to learn I need a website. Okay, I'm not working. I'm going to figure out how to design a website, right? Sure, Squarespace, here we come. And I tapped into a friend who had a business, who had a graphic designer who helped me do a couple of things. Like, I started doing it, and then there's things I couldn't figure out, so she helped me with a couple of things. But then I very quickly realized I didn't have any content. And interior design is all about what stuff looks like. It's not just text really doesn't matter. It's an image-based selling proposition. Then who you are and what you do comes second, but the image base of it is the first part of the sale. So I was like, okay, I got to get some projects outside of my own home that I can put on this new website. So what I decided to do in May of 2020, so this is we're a couple months into COVID. We've been home now for a couple months. My business is legitimate. I became an LLC in February. I was going to school. I was in both programs. So what I decided to do, and this is my sales and marketing hat, is we have a local Facebook moms group in our town, and there are almost 3,000 women on that Facebook moms group, and it's a very active Facebook moms group. So if you need a painter, you put down you need a painter. You need a dog walker, whatever you need, you put this out into this universe, and all these moms will jump on and tell you their experience, their advice, and make recommendations. So I decided I was going to post on this moms group. And I was going to offer to design for free. So my time and my skills were free. However, I would buy product at trade price and mark it up, just like everybody else in the interior design world does. And so that's, as an interior designer, so people know, you make money two ways. You make money charging a fee for your services and your skills, and you make money having a commission or a markup on what we buy. And we buy at prices that are lower than the public can buy. So I was like, I'll stack this way. There's really no risk to someone. So if it takes me 20 hours, that's on me. And if my design at the end you don't like, you don't have to buy anything. It's okay. But if you do buy something, then I'll make a little money at the end.
Right.
So I posted this out on the Facebook moms group, and I thought, maybe in the next week I'll hear from a couple moms. Within 10 minutes, I heard from 35 mothers, all looking for help.
Wow.
Because everyone's home and everyone's looking at their stuff. And one of those moms, ironically, and there's a lesson in this for everybody, the most difficult woman I heard from, because she kept asking me questions. She kept asking me, like, well, what do you need from me? What do I need to do? She kept asking me all these questions, and I was getting so annoyed with her. And finally, I just said to her, I go, you just have to have money to spend. And if you have money to spend to design a room, then let's talk. It's that simple. And she was like, okay. She had a full room, full living room. It was empty. She had a rug. That was it. Got on the phone with her and her husband, who's a, finance guy in Wall Street. And he really just wanted to understand the process and how much it was going to cost. And he wanted the whole room done. He wanted to walk in and have it be completely finished. Artwork, window treatments, coffee table books, accessories, blankets, the whole thing, whole room. I was like, great. And I did it all remotely by Zoom. And it was my first big project. And so I had to go find vendors. I had to go find product. I had to manage to a budget because he gave me a budget. So that part I knew really well. I had to design a presentation. That's what we did in sales. So I dove all into this project, and she sketched out for me the room. She took pictures of the room for me. She took all the dimensions, the windows, all this stuff for me so I could see it. She took pictures of this rug. I was supposed to design the room around this rug. And it was kind of this funky ombre rug with a little bit of purple in it. And, it was my first project. And so the first time I saw this space was when I went to go meet with them with my design presentation. And I had all my fabric samples. I had my printed presentation. We're all in this room 6 feet apart, sitting on the floor on the rug with masks. I've got my budget. So we walk through the presentation. I get to the end and I look at the husband and I'm just thinking, oh my God, he hates it. He goes, there's only one thing I don't like. I was like, okay, what is it? He goes, I don't like that oil candle that you put on one of the tables. Can we change that? I was like, sure. He's like, great. Everything else I love. He bought the whole room as it was.
Wow.
I was like, I'll find you another candle. You want a different candle? I'll find you a different candle. And I mean, I had sourced everything from coffee table books. Like I had literally gone out and figured out what they liked and their interests and gone to
Is
Amazon.
that normal? Is a coffee table book part of interior design?
Sometimes accessories are, yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Because if you want it to all flow, like they just didn't want the furniture in here with nothing on the furniture. They wanted it to look like it was finished. They wanted it to look like a magazine, is what they wanted. And a lot of times people want that. They want to walk into a room and have it look like it does in a magazine. And I'm like, there's a lot of layers to a room if you want it to look like it does in a magazine. That comes at a price, right? So that was my first job, and that was a result of that free post. And then I did some other work as well, and then that gave me content for my website. And then once I had that credibility, and I capped it at 10 small projects. And then I said, after that, I'm going to start charging people.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And then in November of that year, I hired an interior design business coach.
Oh, specific to your industry. That's interesting.
Specific to my industry.
How is that engagement? That's really interesting. I like that.
Yeah. So, I had been able to figure out, I had my certificate, so I knew how to design, and I knew the theory behind design and all of that. And I had figured out QuickBooks and stuff, and I had hired a bookkeeper after I knew I didn't know what I was doing. But
we all need one.
But I really didn't understand. Design school teaches you the theory of how to design, but it doesn't teach you how to run a design business. And there was so much about the industry that I didn't understand. And I really wanted to figure out, how do you become successful? How do you, not just in having clients, but how do you make money in this business? Because it's very easy to not make money. Very, very easy to not make any money here. And so I wanted to figure out, how do I make money in this business? And how do I set up the business with the systems, the processes, the people, understanding the industry? And I didn't have that skill set. So I hired someone to teach it to me, and I worked with her for 2 years, and she was a game changer in terms of how I run my business. Game changer. Well worth the investment in myself and in my business, because I learned so much from her. And now she's in her 60s. And I learned so much from her about how to run a business. And what she also does is it's not just me, it's not one-on-one, you meet in groups. And so I met a whole network of other designers. And I felt like, okay, if I meet other people that are trying to do this in other parts of the country, they won't feel threatened by me, or I won't feel threatened by them.
You're not
maybe
competition.
They'll be open to. Right, exactly. So that's when I joined the group, that was the goal, because that was one of her selling points, is you'll have this network of people who will share contracts and process and stories, and you'll learn. People will come to this weekly group chat and we'll talk about issues, and you'll learn how to solve those issues. You'll learn how to handle those clients and those problems and contractors and all this stuff. And I was like, cool. And the irony of it is two of my best friends right now in the design industry, I met through this program, and one of them lives 10 minutes from my house and the other one lives an hour and a half away. So it was.
And you still don't see each other as competition?
No, not at all.
That's great.
And I'm now friends with quite a few of the designers who are in my town, because there's so much business here and everybody's unique and everybody's different. And I never thought that would happen. In corporate America, there's so much competition for everything. It's like everybody's vying for the next promotion, and everyone is, your competition for that next promotion. So it's such a different experience. But, I always say to people, if you're at a crossroads, or if you don't know if your business can be successful, hire a business coach who understands your business category, and have them really help you, because there could be things that you could be doing in your business, tweaking, that you might not even know about, ways that you could cut expenses, ways that you're not charging enough for your services. How my business coach taught us not only what to charge, but how to justify it, how to say it, and how to ask for it.
Nice. What was the biggest secret sauce thing that was like an aha for you that you got out of that, where it's so industry specific, you could never have just come up with it on your own? What was that one or two big things?
How you make money.
Yeah. And how do you make money?
How you make money. Yeah, how you make money, and how you have to stay in a certain profit margin. So in the design world, you can charge hourly for your services, or you can charge a set fee. And this design coach believed very strongly in charging a set fee, because your hours are a finite resource. And you hear this a lot, if people are trying to become like an enterprise. Like, if you're only one person, there are only so many hours in the day. And if the only way you can make money is off of you and your time, you have capped off your resources as a business, right? So her methodology and her line of thought was that you don't charge hourly anymore, you charge a set fee. And so she spent 6 months teaching us how to come up with that fee, how to keep track of our time, and how to ensure you were charging enough. And that is partially based on where you live, but it's also based on the scope of the job. So teaching you how to write a contract that's very specific so you don't have scope creep. Teaching you how to get legal terms so that you don't get screwed over. Teaching you how to make the ask that people need to pay you more, and here's why. Recognizing interior design is a luxury service. If they're not willing to pay or they think you're expensive, then they are not your client. Because that is just it. Like that we are not a need-based service. We're not a need-based service. We are a luxury add-on item. That's just the reality. So she taught us how to do that. So I think I would have never on my own been able to figure out the economic side of how to make money and the way to think about myself and my time and the value of my time. I had one guy say to me the other day, he's like, you charge almost as much as a doctor does. I'm like, I do, because I have a skill set that 98% of the people in my town don't have.
Right. Yep. I love your willingness to use Liam Neeson's vernacular. I have a particular skill set. I think every professional who's spent real time growing that skill set loves the phrase. And I think it's quite applicable for your work. So now that you're on this side of it, you've got, in 2020, you hung a shingle, you go through all of this, and 3-ish years later, 4-ish years later, what does your business look like now?
So I'm busy.
Good.
So I'm definitely busy. I've still, every year I feel like I learn more and more about the economics and how to run my business.
Yeah.
Good. I do have, so I do a payroll. I pay myself. Profit First, great book. Another great one.
Moskowitz?
Starting as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Hold on, I'll get you that one too.
Yeah, I think it's actually on my desk in my office. I'm not going to run and get it since yours is close. Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. That's what it is. Yes, great book.
Great book. Anyone starting a business, you must read this.
When you were a kid, did your mom have the envelope system like he describes? Because mine did.
Mine did not. Mine did not. But it was interesting when I had to call, my financial person. I was like, okay, so I need 6 more accounts for the business. And she's like, you need what? I'm like, no, I need 6 more bank accounts for the business.
That's exactly what we do here. We've got our operating account, our tax account. We have a special escrow for large projects. We have a tax withholding account. I mean, it's just account after account after account because the buckets matter.
The buckets matter. And she looked at me like I was insane. And I was like, yep, this is just what I need. This is how we're doing it. Like, we need to allocate money into these different buckets. And what I think for me, the most impactful lesson from that book was thinking about yourself and your value and paying yourself. And so I went on payroll right after I read that book. And I pay myself no matter what happens. And I don't pay myself a lot. Because then if the business makes money, then I can pay myself.
You can profit, right.
But I am on payroll. I pay myself. And it was a mindset that my time, and I am just as valuable as an employee as anyone else. And I do have friends who have small businesses that don't pay themselves anything at all. And I'm like, you can't do that. There's a mindset to the value of you as an employee in this business. And if your business loses money, which mine did one year, I was really able to have the mindset and say, my business didn't lose money because I paid me. I worked as an employee, just like my assistant works as an employee. My business lost money because I spent an exorbitant amount of money in advertising and marketing that year because I invested in the business and the growth. And so if I hadn't made that decision to spend that money in marketing and advertising, which I did make that decision, then the business would not have lost money. And I would have gotten paid even more.
That word lose always has bothered me because there are moments where you lose money where you don't know where the hole is and you leaked money, because lose and leak usually are conflated. But and we're in growth mode in our business right now, and I keep looking at things going, where'd that money go? And I'm like, oh wait, no, I made an intelligent decision to go ahead and invest in the team and the infrastructure that will pay off in the coming months and years. And I didn't lose money. I spent to grow because I invested it. And it can still be bad. You can overinvest. You can bury yourself because you don't have the cash flow. There's bad decisions there. But I struggle. And I say the term too. I say, oh, we lost money this month. No, we didn't. We allocated funds in an exorbitant way. I like that term. With a plan.
With a plan. Correct. And it's different than if you if, you know, your bookkeeper, or even you, if you're doing your books, you run your report and all of a sudden it's red and you have no idea why you're in the red.
Yeah.
It's so important as an entrepreneur to understand your books.
Yes.
You don't have to manage your books, but you have to understand your books. And you have to understand what is your profit and loss. What, for me, because I'm a reseller, I sell material, what is my profit percent versus my income? And that is one of my biggest target numbers. Not what is the bottom line and is it black or red? It's, am I running at a profit margin for my business and for my industry that is sustainable for growth? And if I'm not, then I need to either be charging more or I need to figure out why not. Because it's like that profit is what then goes to pay for your expenses, and you need to understand what your expenses are. And most bookkeepers are happy, you know, they love numbers, they're happy to help you understand this, but it's really critical to understanding that, and there's a mindset part to you as an employee of your business. Because if you're never paying yourself, you're just like constantly working for free. And you might not think that bothers you, but it really does. And Profit First talks so much about the importance of paying yourself off of the money that you get in the beginning, which is like you take your money first, and then you have to figure out how to run a business with what's left.
Yeah, no, it is an outstanding book. You know, so we've got 2 in this episode that are game changers. I love it. So there's a third we should be talking about, and the author is pretty close to this conversation. In the middle of all of this, you decided you were going to write a book.
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
Here, I got that one too.
What an incredibly heavy lift it is to be like, oh yeah, I just started a business, so now I'm going to do 2 feet in. And is it because you are always 2 feet in?
That's all in life. It is.
Yeah. All right. So
yep, it is.
I asked you when we were off air, you know, answer for me 2 questions. What was in it for you? Why did you do this for you? And then what do we readers gain from 2 feet in?
Yeah. So what was in it for me? So I started it for me. Part of it, quite honestly, was realizing that there was value in my story and that I could potentially motivate and help, in particular women, but, you know, people at crossroads, because I cover everything in my life. I cover everything from relationships to mindset, wellness, motherhood, career, starting a business, tips and tricks on how to do it, what I learned, interior design in terms of wellness. So I cover so many subjects. I call my book a cross between self-help meets business meets romance novel, because it is kind of all of those. It is all of those. It's really good. It's like you're sitting down having a cup of coffee with me. But so I started it out for myself saying, I feel like I have a responsibility to get this message out to try to help people. And if I can help one person to make a better choice about their life and make a change like I did after getting fired and putting life first and finding the value in that and then finding this whole new me, then there's value in that. But I also made a commitment to myself when I realized I had a story and had enough content for a book. I made a commitment to write the book. And I was not backing down from the commitment to write the book. Like, I committed to write the book. I hired a book coach and I committed to writing every single day from 5 to 6. And so part of it for me was succeeding at this goal that I put out for myself, because I felt the goal had a lot of meaning and that there was a lot of value I could offer. And I didn't want to back down from the goal, because there were times where I was like, I don't want to write about this anymore. But I was so committed to the process and getting it done. And what it gives to someone else. But on the flip side, now that the book is out, the book has absolutely changed my life in so many ways that I never would have imagined.
Okay, tell me about it. How are things changing?
Like my creativity, the people that I've met, the path that I'm taking my business on. So I expanded my interior design business. I'm rebranding in June, and it will now become a lifestyle brand. Lifestyle brand for women, with wellness starts within. And so it focuses on interiors, but it also focuses on inside people. And how do you get interior wellness, and how do you make yourself a priority, and how do you get up the courage to make those changes and make life and you a priority to drive change, to get to inner peace. And so it's a toolkit of things ranging from my book to me speaking to a future podcast, to partnerships with other businesses that align with my platform of wellness, in addition to luxury interior design. So I would have never in a million years imagined that I would be this person who's out there developing a lifestyle brand. Like, this is crazy. So it's changed it in that way. And I've also met people I never would have thought I would have met. And by meeting those people, it's taken me down different roads and different paths and exposed me to so many other entrepreneurs. And I think that path and what you're doing with your podcast is perfect proof of it. I never knew the entrepreneur world. And now I do. And so the people that I've been able to meet and get connected with, even though we have different businesses and different subjects and we specialize in different industries, entrepreneurs struggle with so many of the same things.
Oh,
and
so
you
much.
build this community of people that can relate to your challenges or can help you with resources, or who aren't afraid if you reach out and ask what might sound like a dumb question. They're okay with it because they've had their own dumb questions too that they've had to go find the answers to also.
All day.
You know?
Yeah.
All day, right? And so it's things like, how do I find a virtual assistant? How do I, right? Like, when do I know when to hire? When do I know when to hire a bookkeeper? How do I figure out if I'm supposed to be an LLC or an S Corp or what? Like, what do I do with health insurance? Where do you get good health insurance? What do you do on insurance? Like insurance in general for your business?
Right. General liability. Yep.
Right, exactly. I was like, oh, I need insurance? Okay. Yeah. Then once you have payroll, guess what? You need workman's compensation too. What is that? Oh, okay, cool. But if you talk to other entrepreneurs, just some of the logistics of that, and then even just how do you grow?
Right.
Where do you grow? How do you manage the fact, because entrepreneurs also, I have found now that I am one, most entrepreneurs, and I'm sure you're like this too, our brains are constantly thinking of how to grow and expand the business and what else.
Never turns off.
Never turns
No, it's
off.
always going.
I'm like,
That's how
oh my
we're
goodness,
wired.
I'm on business number 3 here, and I've been doing this for 4 years, and I'm launching business number 3. Like, it's unbelievable, but it's so empowering to now have access to a network of other entrepreneurs, whether it's listening to them on a podcast and then now following them on Instagram or following them on LinkedIn, or getting connected with their business services and learning what they do, or even just connecting with them and asking them a question.
Right. Yeah, and quite selfishly, I started the Bootstrapped Unicorns Facebook group, which is a private group. Any listener can join. I ask all of our guests, so please join it if you have the time and interest.
Yep.
And it's the only pre-qualification is that you are an entrepreneur, or you believe that you're generally walking into an entrepreneurial path, and then you can't sell to each other. And the reason why is we need to be in there to support each other. Now, you can talk about your business. You can say, I do this and I ran into this today. Let's discuss all day. But
Of course.
I have yet to find an honest entrepreneur. Yeah, and what I mean by that is an honest to goodness one that we can verify it's an entrepreneur who is not ready, willing, and able to mentor in some way, shape, or form.
Oh,
It is
agreed.
in
I
all
think
of
everyone
us.
is. It's
Yes.
in everybody. It's just part of the DNA of being an entrepreneur.
100%.
Which, had I never done this, I would have never known that. And so there's so much power in learning that, which then helps me take my book, which was written to help motivate and inspire people to become designers of their own lives. But not only can I now talk to them about my story and my journey and what I learned and make suggestions, but I also now have the journey of being an entrepreneur at a whole nother level that I didn't have even when I wrote the book, to be able to help and inspire people and even just give them the general direction of where to go on certain subjects, or just to chat and have a virtual coffee and chat so people don't feel like they're alone with their struggles.
And that is a thing that entrepreneurs run into often too, is nobody else is going through this. I'm the only one who's ever run into this. I'm gonna have to solve it myself, because we're doers. So we're gonna go and solve it ourselves, and getting into that mode of saying, hey, somebody else has to know about this. I'm not going to be embarrassed that I ran into it. It's not a black eye. I do need to ask around. Your network has the solution if you're willing to be open with it. And entrepreneurs are, in general, an open network of, hey, let's talk about it. And coffee consumption usually is paired with.
Yeah. And it's, and we're all good with Zoom. And, and I found, if you ask someone for 15 minutes of their time, most of the time they'll give you an hour and a half happily.
Unbelievable, but true.
Because they want to share their knowledge, and you'll walk away with like 3 other suggestions or connections or people to reach out to. And so I think we have such a gift by doing that as entrepreneurs, and by having a public, I'm lucky to have a public platform because of my book. So it allows me to have a platform to speak about my book and being an entrepreneur. And I think we have a service to everyone. We have a duty to everyone.
We do. We're all in this together. Yeah, absolutely. So everybody who's watching and listening to this can spend a little time with you by reading your book. So let's find out, where can this be found? I am guessing the great Amazon has copies of your book.
Amazon has my book in every format.
Awesome.
There's a beautiful hardcover of it, which I showed you. There's a soft cover, there's an ebook, and I also recorded the audiobook myself. It's 5.5 hours of listening to me, which I have listened to myself many times. Sometimes I just need a little, kick in the ass and motivation, so I listen to myself. So you can get it anywhere you would get an audiobook, and anywhere you get a digital book, it exists as well. So I encourage people, it's called 2 Feet In, Lessons from an All-in Life by Jeanne Collins. I encourage you, buy it, write a review. Reviews help us on Amazon with the algorithm, and there's a whole thing there. Share it with your friends, and also reach out to me. I love to hear from people who have read my book and said, oh my goodness, chapter 6, I can totally relate. That was me at one point. And now I'm so inspired to go try X because you mentioned it in chapter 10. And I love that.
You mentioned earlier that, if you write this book and it helps one person, then you've won. Have you been getting feedback that people have read it and they're connecting?
They are, yeah, which is great. It's amazing to me, actually. Everyone I send my book to, give my book to, buys my book. I have very few negative reviews, and
you're going to get them. The moment you're public,
you're gonna get them.
I was dealing with a hater on our social media just the other day, and I was like, okay, that actually is great proof that things are happening. The moment you get the haters, you're good. But hey,
and that's just life.
It is life. No, and it's always a sign of growth because people are weird. But one thing I got to ask you before I let you go, and I want to respect your time today. When you were recording your audio book, which I've yet to do one myself, but I've definitely done voiceover work on and off for years. And when I know when I'm a little stuck or it's been a little too repetitive, there's these moments where I have to do it in some weird accent, or I have to just kind of flip a switch and just do something to just shake myself. How did you get through 5.5 hours of recording? What was that thing that made you survive?
A deadline.
Okay, fine. That's fair.
There were a couple things. Yeah, there were 2 things. One was a deadline. Okay, I listened to a lot of audiobooks. I did a lot of walking before I did it, and I would listen to audiobooks when I walked so that I could, and it would be audiobooks that were narrated by the author of the book.
Okay.
So that I could become a student of how do you speak that way. Okay. So I have a degree in public speaking and communications, but recording a book is very different. And so I kept listening to these books to hear how these authors would speak and the transitions and how they were recorded and what do you do when it's another character's voice and how do they do that, right? So I spent a lot of time listening to how people did it. I had a deadline for which I had to get it done. And then I was really, really struggling with the beginning of my book, and I did not like how I sounded. And, I had to create this whole environment, and I had the speaker, and I had the headphones, and all of this, right? I was really struggling with it. So what I did is I skipped ahead. I skipped to later chapters because I kept trying to record these chapters, and I really wasn't liking it. And I was like, you know what? Let's just skip ahead. Let's skip ahead to a later time in my book and a different section of my book, and let's start somewhere else. And once I did that, then I was able to do it. I was like, oh, that chapter was shorter. That chapter was easier. The subject matter of that chapter was less emotional for me and was easier because the beginning is all about my upbringing. So it's a fairly emotional beginning. And so once I felt like, oh, okay, that wasn't terrible. Then I was like, okay, you can do this. You can do this. Because I got one chapter down. I was like, you can do this.
That's awesome.
And then I kept going, and then I actually recorded the beginning of the book at the end.
You live in a very instructive way, because I can tell you do the homework before you get into something, and kind of as you get into it, going and getting the certificates while you're sowing the seeds of building the business. I really like how you handle walking into the next big challenge. And so that's very instructive for our audience. I really appreciate that. When I used to interview people for documentaries, I always had a famous last question, and my crew knew it was always coming, which is, what could I ask you that I wouldn't know to ask you? And so do you have something that you would just love to kind of just slip in there as a final, there's no way Josh could know about this, but the whole world needs to know this?
Absolutely.
Ooh.
So, yes. So for me, sometimes people will ask me, what's your biggest lesson? What's your biggest takeaway from your book? What's your biggest learning from this? And for me, my biggest learning, which is something that I try to communicate to people, is my book is not about me. My book is about the energy that my life and that me as a person that I represent. And that energy is actually the deepest sense of inner peace. And so we go through life trying to find happiness, and happiness ebbs and flows and ups and downs. But if you can figure out how to find inner peace, that is the ticket to putting life first and living your best self. If you can find inner peace, and that's it. And it's all about the energy of it. It's my story is inspiring. The actions and the steps that I take in my story are inspiring, but it's also about the energy with which I live and that I do these things that that's also so can be really what can change lives if you're really paying attention.
Oh, thank you for adding that. That is the perfect way to end this episode. I'm just going to remind you, Bootstrapped Unicorns, that you are listening to Bootstrapped Unicorns, and I'm always grateful for your time and your attention. I and all of the guests that have been on the show are passionate about your journey and your success and your growth. That's why this show even exists. So if you are not subscribed, if you haven't found us in all of the socials, please go and take a moment and do that. And then, go find Jeanne's book, buy it, be inspired, find that inner peace today. We all really ought to have it. We deserve it. And it's not an obvious that you can just go and find it for yourself without doing a little work and a little soul searching. And I know from her example, her life example is so good that this book will help guide you there. I do have to remind everybody, it's my obligation to remind you that hirevp.us/unicorns is where you can find a new virtual professional. And I would be remiss also if I didn't mention that Viking Bags is sponsoring this show. If somebody could edit in an image of me rocking the bag. I don't ride motorcycles, but this motorcycle bag is now my go-to for everything. It's got all of the pockets and all of the things, and it actually makes me still look like an executive as compared to a college student, which was what my last non-Viking bag did to me. I kind of looked like a joke. So I no longer am the joke on the street. I more look like the boss that I'd like to be. And you could be too. Viking Bags, you guys are pretty cool. And with that, next episode, I have no clue who I'm interviewing. I never do. You know that by now. But I do promise you it's going to be somebody who's awesome because we only have the best on our show. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode.